Good afternoon, mayors, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our 14th Livable Cities Lab, brought to you in partnership with the League of Cities of the Philippines and Globe Telecom. PAGASA has officially declared the beginning of the 2021 rainy season. In fact, it declared that last Friday, June 4th. Historically, the peak of the typhoon season runs from July through October, where nearly 7% of all typhoons for the year enter the Philippine Area of Responsibility. This is why cities prepare for disruptions such as heavy rains, strong winds, and floods that may impact our communities. While our minds may all be on COVID, we shouldn't forget the potential for natural disasters like typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanoes. Last year, just as a reminder, we had 21 typhoons in 2020, and the last two were the strongest of the year. So despite these weather disruptions, cities must keep their public services running, especially the ongoing national vaccination program. Planning and preparing for the rainy season will help residents stay safe and strengthen their ability to avoid, adapt, and overcome shocks to their way of living. We're pleased to announce that our lab will be joined by distinguished speakers and experts, and you will hear a great deal of insights and lessons and points of view from each of them today. We will have Metropolitan Manila Development Authority Chairman, MMDA Chairman, Ben Abalos, to talk about how Metro Manila gears up for the rainy season. We have Dr. Misaka Hetriachi, Senior Fellow of the World Wildlife Fund US, to discuss nature-based solutions to floods. We'll have Dr. Andreas Klippe, President and CEO of Flood Control Asia, RS Corporation, to present engineering solutions for critical infrastructure. Mayor Marcelino Chidoro, unfortunately, is not able to make it today. He will be represented by Attorney Princess Feliciano of Marikina City to share the Marikina experience in managing rains and floods. Princess is the city administrator of Marikina City. And then finally, we will have Manny Estrada, the Senior Vice President for Technology Strategy and Service Innovation at Globe Telecom, to discuss beyond the rainy season readiness and connectivity. So we look forward to this afternoon's session. We have a wide-ranging discussion of a combination of nature-based solutions and engineering solutions and good old-fashioned preparedness and technological solutions, digital solutions for flood control and flood warning. This afternoon's session is going to be moderated by Veronica Gabaldon. Veronica, or Veron as she's known to us, is the Executive Director of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, or PDRF. As Executive Director of PDRF, Veron helps shape our strategic directions, programs, and administration of the organization towards the achievement of PDRF's vision to build resilient businesses and communities in the country. PDRF is the major private sector vehicle and coordinator for disaster management. Veron is recognized as one of the active women leaders in the DRR, or Disaster Risk Reduction community in the country. And she was a key member of the team which designed, launched, and operates the country's only private sector-led emergency operations center in Clark, Pampanga. So let me turn over our lab session to Veron to guide us through the rest of the afternoon. Veron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill, for your kind introduction. Welcome everyone to the Livable Cities Philippines webinar on rainy season readiness. We would like to acknowledge the mayors present today, Mayor Lani Revilla of the Bacoor City. We also have Mayor Nicolas Yulo of Bago City, Erickson Singson of Candon City. We also have Mayor Jose Chubasco Cardenas of the Canlaon City, Mayor Manuel Saladaga of Mahayag Municipality, and also Mayor Delio Lood of the Sinacaban Municipality. Thank you very much for joining us. So let us begin by introducing our first speaker, Chairman Benhur Abalos. Honorable Benjamin Abalos Jr. is currently the chairman of the Metro Manila Development Authority. Previously, he served as the city mayor of Mandaluyong, Metro Manila for 5 terms and a congressman for the same city. And as head of the MMDA, Abalos led the agency in responding to the needs of Metro Manila pursuant to the mandates of the MMDA. With this task at hand, Chairman Abalos enjoined all of the agency employees to continue working well in delivering efficient public service. Aside from being the MMDA chairman, he is also the chairman of the Regional Development Council of the National Capital Region and the presiding officer of the Metro Manila Council. Let us please welcome to Livable Cities Labs our first speaker, Chairman Benjamin Abalos Jr. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica. Good afternoon, Bill, Dr. Misaka, Dr. Andreas, Mayor Marcy, Attorney Feliciano, Mr. Manny Estrada, Ms. Veronica Hitosis, mayors, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'll present to you what we're doing right now in the MMDA. First of all, just to give you a brief background about MMDA, the setup is very unique in Metro Manila. MMDA is merely a coordinator amongst all the 17 LGUs. We do not have any police power. We do not have any legislative power. We just coordinate within the 7 mandates. It's development planning, transport, solid waste, flood control, urban renewal, health and sanitation, and of course, public safety. When it comes to flood control and sewage, the main focus is really the formulation and implementation of policies, of course, and integrated metro-wide flood control drainage services in Metro Manila. What is important here is the integration among all 17 cities and municipalities. Now, more or less, to give you a brief backgrounder, this is the budget right now of MMDA. MMDA has, actually our budget comes from 2 agencies. The number one, it's from the national government. We're given about 270 million here and about 30 million per Congress. That's about more or less 1 billion. So it's about 1.2 billion. However, I would like to emphasize this, the big projects are not with the MMDA. I'm talking of pumping stations, etc. The big ones, it's with DPWH, of which they have approximately 10 billion fund for this. The Metro Manila is made up of about 273 waterways, for a combined of 700 kilometers for the natural waterways and about 1,000 kilometers for man-made waterways. That's about 1,700 more or less waterways, and we only have about 700 field personnel. So that only covers about 2 personnel per kilometer. What we do is conduct regular maintenance with this small team within Metro Manila. Of course, there is this hauling of silts, the waterways, and then we've got this just like a jet pump that we have, and then after pushing the silt, we hold them. Okay, so we even have this other the manholes, no, and of course maintenance of pumping stations. In Metro Manila, we've got about 67 pumping stations. Here you will see that these pumping stations were constructed during the time of President Ferdinand Marcos. So more or less on the average, they're about 45 years of age. What is important is, these pumping stations must really be maintained as of now. I believe this year or next year, in agreement with the World Bank, they will be rehabilitated. And it's very timely that they should be rehabilitated. One machine pumps out about 7 cubic meter per second. One machine of each pumping station. This is Tripa de Galina. You could see here the garbage. So even before they reach the pumping station, we make sure that the garbage are really hauled and they're separated. This is just a typical day in Tripa de Galina, and the LGU there is helping us, Pasay. I'll show you one of the pumps. Look at the right side portion. It's just for wood, no? And this destroyed, just these 4 items destroyed this pump, no? And we have to repair it. They are that sensitive, so we must make sure that this garbage will never go to these pumps. And of course, aside from this, we've got esteros cleanups, no? We've covered 29 esteros, and of course, we do this every day. Every day, we have to do this to maintain all of Metro Manila. Of course, aside from this, we even anticipate the hyacinths or water lilies. And we've got some boats for this. We try to really harvest them. But we have a new one right now. We're going to hold them. We're going to launch this probably next month. get the water hyacinth, harvest them, and then process them into charcoal briquettes. Probably we're going to help some communities within the Pasig River so that this product could be sold, no, in the market. That's how we could also get rid of this water hyacinth. Now, let's go now to the Metro Manila Management Project Phase 1. This is one typical pumping station. We've launched these granulators of solid waste management and brick making. The ones that you've seen, the garbage, what we try to do is separate this garbage into biodegradable and gradable. All of this garbage, all of this waste came from the river. So these are new machines. We've got employees. We launched this last month. And for those that are biodegradable, we turn them into fertilizers and other products. But the remaining plastics, we mixed some cements, and they are now used as MMDA barriers, bricks, no, and hollow blocks. Of course, the other bio waste will be for compost materials. For us, of course, this is very important, the launching of mobile materials recovery facilities. More or less, that kind of project means that we're into heavy recycling. Each of the residents will be given a passbook. They earn points. Be it plastic, we have a menu here, and they could choose from the points groceries. Now, this is, of course, circular economy, because we've also discussed things with the junkyard owners, operators, and they're the ones who will buy this junk, these plastics, and even those who recycle these products. So that by itself is a system. Now let's go here about the completion of other pumping station. This one is the Balut pumping station. And lately, this one is a mechanized trash traps. But last week, I've asked our technical people to design a floating trash trap to be placed in all rivers, esteros, and even canals, which will harvest every day. I will assign personnel here. This one is in also in Tripa de Galina. We've placed we just invented this actually. It's a net. It's a floating boom trash net. We're able to get so many, I think this is at least 2 truckloads of trash, and then we're harvesting them. No? Just in one day, it's about 2 truckloads. So what we plan to do is distribute this all over the rivers, the steros, and even design a small one for small canals every day. But what is more important is not really, these are things that are palliative. We're just reacting to a problem. But what is important and the ultimate solution here is really the mindset of the people. Number one, we are now going to meet with the Metro Manila mayors. We're going to harmonize this anti-littering campaign. We're going to review. If you're going to throw it away, probably you could throw some garbage. You could have community service. You could be the one to clean the river for one as a punishment. And the most important thing, of course, is the recycling, so that ultimately there will be no more garbage all over, even in the roads or even in the rivers. So these are some of the features of the trash traps that we've implemented last week. These are some of the things that our team has done. We started this about 2 or 3 months ago with Mayor Marcy here. This area was overwhelmed during Typhoon Ulysses. The water was destroyed, and water was so high it even reached the roof of the houses here in Provident Village. So we had it immediately completed. It was about 3 weeks ago, and this is the phase 2 in Marikina. And I would like to commend other NGOs. For one, Mr. Ramon Ang, for helping in this Saving Pasig River. He purchased several adobe breaker because Pasig River is full of adobe, so he wants to break it for about 20 feet so that the level of water will really be deep and it will just flow away. And not only that, he even purchased on his own several equipments. On the right portion, this is with Mayor Marcy of Marikina. Of course, this is led by our good Secretary Simatu. They call it, the national government's program is Build Back Better. What we intend to do through the agency of DNR, to the leadership of Secretary Simatu, is widen the river and, of course, deepen it no? Talagang papalaliman ito at lalaparan ito, no? So this will be a very focused program. There's a program here, and we will continue, and MMDA will assist in this program. So more or less, this is what's happening. I'm only given 10 minutes, Bill, so I hope I'm within the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Abalos. Flood concern in Metro Manila is no easy task for MMDA, and we need to find innovative, and not only innovative solutions, but proactive ones. And I like what you said, sir, about the mindset of the people. Indeed, we need to rally behind all these efforts and be part of the solution. Thank you very much. For our next speaker, we have invited World Wildlife Fund Senior Fellow, Dr. Misaka Hetiarachi. Dr. Misaka Hetiarachi is a senior fellow at the World Wildlife Fund USA and a global lead trainer of WWF's Flood Green Guide program. Dr. Misaka is a civil and environmental engineer by training and holds a PhD in environmental planning from the University of Queensland, Australia. He has worked in post-disaster environmental management in many countries, including Sri Lanka, Nepal, Haiti, and the Philippines and Australia. He's also actively engaged in teaching and research in environmental policy and governance, and as an adjunct associate professor at the James Cook University, Australia, a visiting scholar at the Northwestern University, USA, and visiting lecturer at the University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. Dr. Misaka will talk about the Flood Green Guide initiative and discuss some overarching concepts of integrated and nature-based flood risk management. Friends, let us welcome Dr. Misaka Hetiarachi.
Thank you very much, Ms. Veron, for that very generous introduction. I represent, as Ms. Veron mentioned, World Wildlife Fund, which is most commonly known as WWF. WWF's Environment and Disaster Management program, which is a program focusing on different aspects of disaster and environment nexus. My program in WWF, as I said, we look at different aspects of disaster environment nexus, from disaster reconstruction to disaster risk reduction aspects such as flood risk management. And one of our major projects is the Flood Green Guide project or initiative, or officially known as Natural and Nature-Based Flood Management Green Guide, which is supported by the US AID. It's not a technical guide, it's a conceptual framework to help, especially middle-level decision makers in flood risk management, to incorporate natural and nature-based methods and integrated flood risk management concepts into their decision making. I'll come into the book shortly after going through the main concepts. Main knowledge portal, which is given here, envirodm.org, provides more information about our program, as well as it's a repository of different knowledge resources on nature-based flood risk management. Okay, before I go into the presentation, let's begin with a poll question. Among the participants here, how many of you think that flood risk management should always strive to eliminate all floods? Yes or no? Don't think about it too much, just your gut reaction is what we need here. Okay, it's a close call. About still the majority thinks it should be, all floods should be eliminated. And just over 40% think that eliminating all floods should not be the main objective of flood risk management. Okay, let's discuss about this a little bit more. So, does flooding always cause disasters? A disaster, by definition, is a serious disruption of the society, causing widespread human, material, and environmental losses that exceeds the ability of the affected society to cope using only its own resources. Right, let me show you a photograph. Now, this is an annual flood from Amazon. As you can see, it covers large tract of land, probably hundreds of square kilometers, entirely inundated. But can you see any of those factors, right, which define a disaster in this landscape. Widespread human and material environmental losses, societies affected, none. Right? Even the ecosystem is inundated. It looks very resilient. It looks very green. It will bounce back in no time, which in a much better way, in a much fertile way than before the floods. Floods are not always disasters. In most ecosystems and also in human societies, floods are actually considered as a blessing. However, flooding can be a hazard to human communities. It could be a potential damage. So what we have to keep in mind is managing the risks is not always stopping the flood. So at WWS EDM program, we would like to, our first motto is that there is nothing called natural disaster. There are no natural disasters. There are natural hazards. For example, to understand it more easily, let's take the example of a scissor lying on the floor. It's a hazard, like somebody can step on it and cut their feet, right? Or the hands if they try to pick it up. But because of that potential danger, the scissor by itself doesn't become a disaster. Different groups and individuals could be vulnerable to this hazard in different ways. Like if you take the scissor example, an elderly person with poor sight or a young kid with less experience, right, and perception might be dangerous to these groups and individuals than adult men and women who are healthy and their perceptions are better, the eyesight is good. Hazard becoming a disaster depends on the individuals or the communities who are facing whose vulnerability and capacity to deal with it, right? Who are facing these hazards. So only if these individuals and communities interact with this hazard and actually incur or suffer damage, then only it becomes a disaster. To explain it a little bit more, let's take a photograph, like an example from Metro Manila itself. If you see this photograph, obviously it's a flood-prone environment, but for the people who are living in these high rises, like obviously the exposure is low, their economic conditions, their health conditions might be fairly good, so their vulnerability is also low, and thus their risk is low. If you take the low-income communities living right next to the waterways, the exposure is high, their ability to cope with the disaster is very low, so the vulnerability is high, their health conditions might be low, therefore the risk is very high. And also there could be communities where there's same level of exposure as with these low-income communities, but their ability to deal with the flood, their economic capabilities, their health conditions might be much better. So although the exposure is the same, the risk is low. This shows, although the hazard might be the same, it poses different risks geographically, temporally, and according to the social groups. Also, what we have to keep in mind is, especially in this day and age, the risks are uncertain. The fixed views about risks, the 20-year floods, the 50-year floods, those notions actually have flown out of the window with the modern changes in the climate, right? For instance, in Colombo, we get a 50-year flood almost every other year now, right? It's changing. Like we can't be sure, we can't be deterministic about our flood risks anymore. We have to embrace this uncertainty around it. So with this perception of uncertainty, what are the principles, what are the concepts that we can use to deal with floods? First, plan to eliminate or reduce the risk, not always the flood. Start with comprehensive risk assessment, consider uncertainties, and develop clear objectives. Start with flood risk management objectives. What risks to deal with? Where are these risks? When to, what are the timeframes for these plans? Do not jump into this method or that method, whether it's a natural or nature-based methods, whether it's a hard engineering method, or whether it's a non-structural method. Don't jump into methods first. Understand your risk and clearly develop your flood risk management objectives. There are two approaches to flood risk management. One is managing the flood flows by reducing the inundation. And the second is adapting to floods and living better with floods, not trying to reduce the inundation level. Now, we can't say one or the other of these is better, but we have to be balanced about both. Plan your flood risk management in a watershed perspective. Different risks can occur in different parts of the watershed. Roots of the risk might originate in one part and the floods can happen in the other, and different risks emerge in different scales, like watershed scale, floodplain scale, community or household scale, and they have to be managed with interventions at these different scales. Principle 3, engage community. It's not just like a window dressing. Use proper community engagement tools through and through to gather data, build relationships, empower communities, and share knowledge and findings. One other very important principle is to try to provide multiple social ecological benefits through your flood risk management methods, not just reducing the inundation. Like, try to generate income possibilities, livelihoods, recreational benefits through your flood risk management methods. That's where natural and nature-based methods come into play, where in most of these methods, you can generate multiple benefits like livelihoods, like recreational facilities, and so on. To reduce flash floods in a coastal city, before I go into methods, what are the methods that you think, what is the best method combination that you think can be applied for flash floods in a coastal city? Sorry, it's a question that would take a little bit of time, but let's try to answer it as soon as possible just to stay within the time. Okay, so about 60% think revegetation of upper watershed, so mostly natural and nature-based methods. I'm happy to hear that, but let's look at this question a little bit in detail. Right, so there are 3 types of methods: non-structural methods, soft or green structural methods, and hard or gray structural methods. Non-structural methods are the methods which do not need any physical interventions. We'll see some examples later. The soft structural methods are the methods which do involve physical interventions, but are based on natural and nature-based approaches. And then you get the hard structural methods, which are our usual dams, dikes, and hard engineering methods. So these are the methods that we look at in our flood green guide. We look at 29 methods, but it's not limited to that. They're like the methods available. We look at these 29 methods in detail. To give you an idea about what these methods mean, let's look at a very short video, and I'll end my presentation with that.
You should always start with non-structural methods as your first line of defense in flood risk management. These methods do not require any physical interventions or construction. Instead, non-structural methods focus on changing human behavior and practices as well as legal or social norms. These might include building codes for floodproofing at a community level, or providing flood preparedness training at a household level. If non-structural methods alone are not enough to manage risk, you may need to combine these methods with structural methods, which require physical interventions or construction. There are 2 kinds of structural methods: hard or gray methods and soft or green methods. We recommend you choose soft or green methods as the second line of defense to pair with your non-structural methods. Examples of soft structural methods include wetland restoration, marshland management or creation, and rainwater harvesting. Lastly, if needed, you may need to consider hard structural methods. These might include structures such as diversions or reservoirs. Hard structural methods may need to be included with your non-structural and soft green methods to create the third leg of a 3-legged stool. You may have the best chance of successfully meeting your flood management objective with a combination of methods. These methods may keep you and your environment safer from future flood impacts.
So with this, I will bring my presentation to a close. This is a very brief introduction to our program, Flood Green Guide program. The Flood Green Guide is freely downloadable from our knowledge portal, envirodm.org. It's a guideline which provides a little bit of technical details, but mostly a framework to apply them, what you see in the foreground, like different steps that you can take at different stages of the flood risk management decision cycle. It provides easy to understand illustrations and also some worksheets and other decision support tools which you can use. So please feel free to visit our website. We have like an ongoing training program also on the flood green guide. If you are interested, please do contact us. We provide standalone trainings as well as jointly with partners as part of other training programs. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Misaka, for that very informative presentation. Very good examples of managing flood risks, and not only that, adapting to it. So I see there are several questions already on how to have access to the guidebook, and it's good that you have given the information. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Andreas Klippe, President and CEO of Flood Control Asia RS Corporation. Engineer and entrepreneur Dr. Andreas, or Andy for short, is a German citizen and residing in the Philippines. He has 32 years of experience in engineering, consulting, and entrepreneurship. He was educated in process engineering at the Technical University of Berlin and in integrated German-French Europe studies at an elite university in France, École de, my goodness, my French just escaped me, okay? In 1996, Andreas Klippe finished his doctorate degree in process engineering at the Technical University of Berlin, Department of Process and Chemical Engineering and Wastewater Treatment with summa cum laude honors. In September 2012, the German Vice Chancellor and Secretary of Trade and Industry, Dr. Philipp Rösler, chose Dr. Klippe as a member of his political and business delegation to Vietnam and Thailand. The topic was flood control. He is the editor of the Flood Expert blog with the best flood prevention tips for Asia and the creator of the 5 methods of flood control. Let us welcome Dr. Andreas Klippe. Sir.
Thank you very much. Magandang hapon, Senjala Hat. Good afternoon, everybody. Guten Nachmittag. Veronica, thank you very much. I want to greet also all panelists, but before, thank you very much to the chairman of the Livable Cities, Guillermo Bill Luz, for this invitation. Chairperson Ben-Hur Abalos from MMDA, very interesting about the pumping stations, Dr. Misaka and Mayor or the representatives from Marikina City, and Emmanuel Estrada from Globe Telecom. And I also want to welcome the other mayors. I saw the list before: Louis Revilla from Bacoor, Kandon, Kalaoan, I hope I pronounced it well, and the Antipolo City Police. And let me also welcome Her Excellency, the German ambassador to the Philippines, Madam Anke Reifenstühl. She is also with us and concerned about this topic and wants, of course, to share her experience as well and to support from the governmental side as fast as she can. Welcome, Madam Ambassador. I also want to greet and welcome Principal Urban Planner and Architect Felino June Palafox, my chairman in the Urban Planning Committee at the Management Association. June, welcome. And now let's start and begin. I have to share my screen, and I think here we go. So the topic is engineering solutions for critical infrastructures against flood. Perhaps you might ask the question, how can this guy who doesn't look Asian, who is even not a Filipino, can tell you something about flooding? We in the Philippines, and I also greet the representatives from flood control in Malaysia and from Singapore. We know what flooding is, and Sri Lanka, India, we all know that, but you, German guy, you have no idea about that. Sorry, Po. We know very well what flooding is, not only because we have 4 big, huge rivers in Europe, and they overflow regularly, but it is not only the overflowing of rivers, it is also the flash floods, what we realize more and more. And Dr. Misaka said before, now in Colombo, they realize a 50 years rainfall almost every second year. And that is what we also observe. So Germany is very well familiar with flooding in Europe. And perhaps some of you might say, oh, these technologies to protect it's not for me, because on the household scale and the community scale, that is normally what a normal person can observe. The rest is for the government and for the institutions. Perhaps to say, okay, the technology is unknown, confusing ads in Facebook that all promise a solution, not enough technical know-how to distinguish between a serious and a fly-by-night supplier, because don't forget, we play with the safety of the families and the life. That is what Chairman Abalos has said with the pumping stations, and when they are damaged, that will cause huge effects. Perhaps some of you might say, I don't need flood protection. It will not happen to me. That only happens to others. And I can still make myself safe with sandbags. Or you ask a friend and they tell you, don't spend money for that. We can something fabricate with a wooden or metal barrier. Cannot be that difficult. And that is the best. We have already seen a 100-year storm. That's for the next 100 years. That's it. Or number 9, you do not need to make a decision now, do it later. I think everybody has heard these arguments here and then. So let's have a look. That is the Philippines, and the river meanders already very well through the valley and has already overflown along the whole length. You can see very well the shape of the river. And of course, the question is, can we protect the whole valley? Let me ask the question this way. Yes, we can. It is possible, but it takes very long, of course, because huge infrastructural constructions are needed. So that is why I say, let's concentrate on critical infrastructure. That is what Dr. Misaka said, community scale, household scale. So what is critical infrastructure? That is everything what is necessary to run a country. City hall, transformer station, water pumping station, factories, barangay offices. For all those not here in the Philippines, the smallest municipal unit, district unit, police stations, airport, subway, all these things play a role and are very important when it comes to run a country and to run it continuously. So why did I put a private house? Let me just ask, I cannot see everybody because I share my screen, but probably you can see me. And who is a house owner? Just raise your hand. Who is a house owner? I hope there are some who are raising the hand. So I am a house owner and I know what flooding means. And for us, it is our critical infrastructure, because when our home has been blown away, then we are homeless unless we have a second home. But that is our critical infrastructure. So why do they have to go through this? Good question. That is first the garbage problem. We have seen that before. That is the urbanization. June Palafox, you created this expression, the uglification of a city. I really like that, the uglification of a city. But of course, you as an architect and me as an engineer, I prefer to speak about the beautification of a city. However, these are two major problems. And the third problem is, of course, the climate change. Let us come to the first poll question, please. As climate change persists, do you think the rising temperature of the ocean will generate more frequent and more powerful storms like typhoons or hurricanes? So just say yes or no. As climate change persists, do you think the rising temperature of the ocean will generate more frequent and more powerful storms like typhoons or hurricanes, depending where you live? Yes or no? 2% say no, 98% say yes. Indeed, interesting, because the power for the typhoons is coming from the energy from the sea. So the warmer the ocean is, the more energy will be transferred to the typhoon, and the typhoon needs 26.5 degrees to be born. So the warmer the ocean is, the more typhoons you will get. The expectation in rising sea levels is, in the meantime, almost half a meter. And we are far away to stay with 1.5 degrees increase of temperature. We will rather even be higher than 2 degrees. So the result is a hurricane, a typhoon, and the Philippines with an average 25 typhoons a year are the most destructive country. I've just mentioned the six coastliest typhoons, perhaps you see the damages go from about 5 billion to 2 billion, up to $2 billion. Sorry, up to $2 billion. Just the next poll question, perhaps. Is it possible to manage flooding in low-lying areas, for instance, lower than sea level? Can we see the next poll question, please? Is it possible, thank you, is it possible to manage flooding in low-lying areas, for instance, lower than sea level? Veronica, I think everybody has voted. I cannot see it, thank you. Let's see, okay, yes, yeah, the Netherlands are a very good example for that, of course. The question is not the sea level. Of course, it plays a role for the shorelines. Of course, Metro Manila is facing tremendous problems. And at the end of the century, huge parts of Metro Manila, New York, and the northern countries might have disappeared because of the rising sea levels. But there are other technologies, like in Venice, for instance, that can help. So what have we done? What have we done to manage flooding? Perhaps you know this practice. And before I continue, just the next poll question, please. With the worsening typhoons and floodings, do you consider traditional flood solutions like sandbags effective? Think about Roas Boulevard. And with the worsening typhoons and flooding, do you consider traditional flood solutions like sandbags effective? Yes or no? That is what we hear again and again. There are still some who think it works. It might work for smaller, thank you very much, 17%. It might work for smaller areas when you have a small flooding scenario. But it definitely don't work for longer, because most of the time these sandbags are washed away or can serve to walk in the water. But when I see at the left side this wall will definitely not help, because it's done in a wrong way. It's too slim and it will collapse. It will definitely not protect you when it comes to a flooding scenario. You can use metal sheets, wooden planks, and the question is, elevating the ground, of course, very expensive. Are these effective? Are these effective measures? I give you a very clear no from my side. It will not protect your house, your factory, the school, and other critical infrastructure. Deborah Roberts, quite popular, the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Council on Climate Change, said the decisions we make today are critical in ensuring a safe and sustainable world for everyone, both now and in the future. And President Rodrigo Duterte has said science, technology, period. It's innovation, period. You innovate now or you perish, period. Mr. President, I thank you very much. Me as an engineer, that is exactly what counts. To believe in God is one thing, but to protect yourself and your loved ones and your belongings, like malls, hospitals, fabrication sites, is another thing. We also have the mayor from Bacoor. We protected already 2 malls there, 2 SM malls in Cavite, in Bacoor, and Molino, and they know what they're talking about. Let me show you a small case study. And that brings us to Southeast Asia. To Southeast Asia, and heavy rain and torrential rain caused 9 flooding incidents in 2011. In 2011, 8 reported floods in 2012. And there was this pre-dawn thunderstorm known as Sumatra in April 2, 2012. And 8 in 2013, so quite regular. And that was a problem because the subway and the tunnel were flooded. So the Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Hsien Loong, I hope I pronounced it well, is an advanced thinker. So he had to find a solution. And They finally found the flood experts in Germany, and you can see the gentleman with the yellow shorts, that is Rainer Stepanek, our business partner and friend. He invented the modern flood barriers 1990 in Limburg, 30 minutes north of Frankfurt. So Rainer Stepanek, at the right side, that is Theo, the distributor in Singapore, and next to me is Maria Fatima, the co-founder of Flood Control Asia here in Clark. And together we were visiting the work. Theo was able to install more than 20 stations with the flood barriers. And the first what they did is to protect the elevators. I see that very often, that elevators are not protected, even on 6th floors of buildings where you don't expect flooding. I can tell you, in the San Lorenzo Towers here in Makati, there was a flooding recently. The water went into the shaft of the elevator because nobody was thinking about the drainage system on the platform at the 6th floor. And of course, the access to the tunnel system. And if you might ask, it's very disturbing. How can you handle that when the people want to use the subway? First, when the flooding scenario comes in, nobody is using the subway unless you still operate. But when it is dismantled, it looks like that. You cannot see anything anymore. And a good architect knows how to hide the side channels into the wall, in the facade, that nobody else can damage it, or it is not disturbing. Case study number 2. That brings us to the Middle East. Many Filipinos have family members working as overseas workers in the Middle East. And I was choosing an example in Doha, in Qatar. It is Doha Education City. Her Highness Sheikha Moza, she is the mother of the current Emir. She is a chairwoman of Qatar Foundation and the Qatar Academy. And her vision is to make Doha Education City the hub of education for the Arab world, if not for the whole world. And it is really breathtaking how much Qatar has invested in educating the people. And she had a problem because in 2018 there was this flooding, and what to do? The same question like in Singapore. And before I answer it, let's see what Doha Education City is. That is really a whole city, with a tram and waiting stations for the tram, with aircon inside, subway stations, in the meantime, a FIFA World Cup stadium, and a lot of public libraries, universities, etc. And the Qatar Academy now, as you can see, is protected with these aluminium barriers there in between the building. In total, we protected 12 buildings. Texas University is one, the Qatar National Convention Center, the National Library, and Liberal Arts. And they really were choosing the best and most famous architects in the world. I think, June Palafox, you were not involved because you already made the master plan for Dubai. And you were quite busy with that. But it is really breathtaking from an architectural point of view. Next time when you're in Doha, just go along and check it out. So what was the challenge? The challenge was to protect this carousel building, what plays a very important role for the Emir. And the red line indicates the protection, but it should be a dismantleable protection, not a permanent protection. Nobody wants to have a concrete wall, because concrete wall, imagine you put a concrete wall along Marikina River. Yeah? We were talking to the mayor in Marikina a long time ago, and of course, he does not want to have a concrete wall. You feel like in jail. So it must be something dismantleable. And you can already see these mobile flood barriers with the blue membrane. And the blue membrane is only making it almost 100% watertight. And that is how it looks like. Starting at the right side, going to the left side, almost 200 meters of flood barriers. Everything was installed with Filipino engineers, educated following our German standards here in Clark, Pampanga, north of Manila. And the 200 meters, I think they were installed in almost 1 hour. And the good thing, everything is reusable. It's aluminum, you can use it. I always say a good flood protection must work for 50 years. With a German maintenance program, you make it 100 years. So it's for 100 years, the membrane. From time to time, of course, you replace. This heavy chain is only avoiding that the wind is blowing it away. And now you see it at the left side without. and at the right side when the typhoon or heavy rain is expected. And I said already, you can install these barriers within a very, very short time of minutes or an hour. The National Convention Center, 700 meters around, is now safe. And there is a tunnel system inside, so it was very important to protect it, because if not, the tunnel system, like in Singapore and the subway might get flooded as well. Our engineers were also installing this park house entrance. That is the lowest park house entrance, and the installation height was 1.80 meters with these demountable barriers. Very lightweight and easy to install. Are you still ready for case study number 3? I have a small one, that is a short one now. And that brings us to Southeast Asia, which is a country. The country is the Philippines. I want to share the experience that we made to protect the Jose Payumo Jr. Memorial Hospital in Bataan, in Dunalupian, Philippines, and the Mazantol main health center in Mazantol, Philippines. What was the reason? Of course, COVID-19 is all over the country in our mind, and it is really very bad if you have COVID-19 patients in a hospital, but what is worse is when this hospital gets flooded. That is a worst case scenario, because then everybody is influenced. So you can see these main 3 entrances in Mazantol at the left side have been installed with these flood barriers, and in the middle that is a German ambassador to the Philippines, Her Excellency Anke Reifenstühl, and at the right side the Honorable Mayor Danilo Ginto at the opening ceremony. That is the Dinalupian District Hospital in Bataan, where we did engineering assessment. That is very important to know where the drainages are, etc., and how it can be done. And the Mayor, Honorable Angela Garcia, together with Governor Albert Garcia, and at the right side, Maria Fatima Uzi, the co-founder of Flood Control Asia. I come to an end already. What shall I do? That is the question. I mean, to share the scenarios, what is going wrong is one thing, but we don't tell you how devastating a fire is. We teach you what kind of fire extinguisher you take and which will help you and how to operate. But we do that for flooding, and the thing is, what shall I do? Everything starts with a flood protection plan. That is what we highly suggest, because without a good plan, that is German standard. We engineers are like that. First, I need a plan. Without plan, I don't move. And that shortens the whole procedure. And it's a little bit different to this kind of the world. But anyway, the question is, and that is the same question for all of us, are we prepared if another super typhoon comes? And will we allow history to repeat itself? I think it's time to take action. And what I want to offer to you, because my time is over and I could only share some small elements, is the possibility you can get a seat and subscribe for free for a webinar that will share the news, the blogs, the insights, and case studies from other countries, from other house owners. I have seen Anel Ignacio is also here as an attendee, and he made his experience, and now his house is protected. So all these things we share. Just Alvin, I think you can share the link you did already in the chat. Join the flood experts, and that is a good thing for everybody. There are free webinars very specific to your needs, for house owners, for architects and engineers, for manufacturers, hotel owners, malls, shop owners, hospitals, etc. However, we will start with that in about 3 to 4 weeks. And now what you can get is your slot, because we are limited with these things. That is for free. Just take a screenshot, take your smartphone and register now if you like. If you don't want to do that later, just make a screenshot and do that later. So, yeah, and then perhaps you can join the group of proactive people, because that is exactly what is necessary. Let me share you one more slide. Come on, that must be possible. That is just because we talk about livable cities. That is an emergency vehicle, this red one, next to the village of Steinkrems in Austria, next to Germany. Perhaps we can do we have the time for the last question, the poll? Very short. During heavy rain, some rivers have been consistently overflowing and caused flooding. Do you think it is still possible to manage river overflow? Yes or no? Do you still think it is possible to manage river overflow? Yes or no? Okay, thank you. So 93% are convinced, very good. Of course, not in any case it is possible, but in many. And in this case, this small part inside the dike is already protecting the whole municipality behind. What you can do is for the rivers and waterways along the waterway, just these mobile flood barriers. That is in Sweden or in Newcastle in England, 700 meters from the environmental agency. In less than 2 hours, the installation and the dismantling took 1 hour. I run through it because all these things I will explain very well in detail, that you can have the most of the benefit out of that in the webinars. Or automatic barriers, that is in Frankfurt South Station, and you can see this yellow one, that is an automatic flip-up barrier and working without electricity, without pneumatics. And what this image and the 7 dwarfs and Snow White have to do with flood protection and why Snow White is not on this picture, I will explain that in the webinar. So you are highly welcome to join the group of foresighted people, modern people, and flood protected people. Then we give you a thumbs up. And perhaps you like to join the webinars for free, specific for your needs. Get your slot. And let me thank you. And as always, I close with stay safe and flood free.
Thank you, Dr. Andreas. Thank you for very good examples of best practices using engineering technology solution for flood control and management at the city level to community as well as household. On to our next presentation. We have also invited Mayor Marcelino Teodoro of Marikina. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, he will not be able to make it. He will be represented by his Deputy City Administrator, Attorney Princess Feliciano, to discuss how Metro Manila gears up for rainy season. Let us all welcome Attorney Princess Feliciano.
Thank you, Ms. Veronica. I would like to greet our panelists, Chairperson Denher Abalos, Dr. Andreas, Dr. Misaka, and Sir Emmanuel Estrada, as well as the team from Livable Cities and our attendees today. Good afternoon. Allow me to share to you what Marikina City has been doing as far as preparation for the rainy season. As you know, not all LGUs are created equal. The topography of Marikina, a catch basin with a downstream river, it's a valley, so naturally it puts us at a disadvantage in terms of flooding. It has been a perennial challenge, and we are now focusing on a more sustainable approach through the restoration of our Marikina River and mitigation of flooding through a hybrid of structural and non-structural strategies. I think Dr. Misaka touched upon this in his presentation. So we have flood mitigation structures, such as our perimeter retaining walls. Chairman Abalos presented this a while ago. This is the perimeter wall. It was damaged during Ulysses. This is in Provident area. We also have slope protection structures. What is being shown to you now is the slope protection that is from Nangka to Mana in Malanday. We also have drainage outfalls. So those drainage outfalls are in Barangay Concepcion Dos, Barangay Malanday, Tumana, as well as in Tanyo. Okay, we also have constructions and rehabilitations of our box culverts. So this is in Barangay Fortune, just beside our DRRM office, and of course our pumping stations in various barangays. Aside from the flood mitigation structures, we have initiated dredging activities to widen and deepen the river in order to achieve at least 4 meters per second, which is the ideal water velocity needed to avoid flooding in our low-lying areas. Similarly, we have consistent clearing operations for our smaller water passageways and routine maintenance of our public drainage systems. Now, along with this Marikina River restoration and flood mitigation measures, of course, we need to complement it by our emergency and disaster protocols at all stages, from preparedness to response to recovery, as well as at all levels in the local government and in our communities. Our whole of government and whole of society approaches manifest in our emergency and disaster mechanisms. Okay, so we have our Rescue 161 operations. We monitor 24 hours daily to our various departments. Our DRRM office, or Rescue 161, handles all information from all agencies. Our Parks and Development Office handles the manual monitoring of the Marikina River. And our other offices, our Office of the Public Safety and Security, our Engineering Department, our Community Relations Office, as well as our Marikina Settlement Office, gather data from the ground via manual monitoring and in coordination with our communities. Okay, we have in place a 3-level alarm or warning system. Now, everyone in Marikina knows this. The first warning is a 1-minute alarm when the water level is at 15 meters. It means that everyone must be alert, and those in low-lying areas should prepare to evacuate. The second warning is a 2-minute alarm when the water level is at 16 meters. Those in low-lying areas should evacuate at this point. The third warning is a 5-minute alarm when the water level reaches 18 meters. And at this point, forced evacuation is enforced. Our evacuation camps are already on standby once the water level reaches 30 meters and are activated at the first alarm. Our rescue operations commence immediately as soon as we receive information to our Rescue 161 hotline, as well as close monitoring of our social media accounts, groups, and rescue hashtags. We also gather emergency information from our community groups and leaders and area coordinators and other monitoring agencies. Our boats and vehicles are on standby and are ready for deployment at all times. Okay, we understand that because we are in a pandemic, it's important that we should be ready to continue on with our operations in response to the COVID-19. Last November, because of Typhoon Ulysses concurring with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to promptly adopt our established systems. Particularly, we had to significantly adjust our evacuation camp management in order to adhere to minimum public health standards. The health and condition of our evacuees were monitored, so we made use of the no-touch thermal scanners. Our health officers are on standby, and face mask is a mandatory supply that we needed. There were disinfection areas and sanitation teams present. We ensured minimal interaction by delivering all their needs direct to their rooms, from food to hygiene kits. Because of the implementation of public health protocols, only 30% of the previous capacity were allowed in each camp. Because of this, we had to double the number of our camps. This year, we begin the rainy season with both the local and national governments focused on our vaccination rollout. Since all our vaccination facilities are covered, rainfall up to a certain level will not deter our vaccination program. We also have a mobile vaccination clinic that can go directly to our communities to vaccinate our people. We currently are using 5 mega vaccination facilities, 2 of which are government facilities repurposed for the vaccination program. You're looking at our convention center that we converted into a vaccination center as well. We currently are in the process of institutionalizing our vaccination program. We recognize that this is not a short-term undertaking and permanent facility and system should be in place. We are now converting our existing 8-story building, that is our sports center, to a self-sufficient mega vaccine facility. Our presentation is very short. I hope that you will be able to pick up on our preparations and our practices in Marikina and our experience as far as preparing and having our system ready for the rainy season. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Attorney Princess, for sharing with us your flood management system coming from your long experience of flooding incidents. We now come to our last speaker, but definitely not the least. Let us welcome Engineer Emmanuel Estrada. Engineer Manny Estrada graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Electronics and Communications Engineering from the University of Santo Tomas in 1982 and is currently Senior Vice President of Technology Strategy and Service Integration of Globe Telecom. He is responsible for intrusive and emerging technology adoption and the testing, validation, and integration of new services and technologies into Globe's network, including software-defined network and network function virtualization, 5G, Internet of Things, and its various applications, including intelligent communities. Friends, let's welcome Mr. Manny Estrada.
Isang peligrosong trabaho ang pangingisda.
Ay, nakakakaba sir kasi yung pinupuntahan po namin lugar sa Pacific. Minsan hindi po namin alam kung makakarating kami sa tabi o hindi na.
Pero narito ang magiging katuwang ng ating mga mangingisda. Ipinakikilala ang isang inisyatibo na magiging gabay bago maglayag sa karagatan. ISDAP. Sa pamamagitan ng ISDAP, mamomonitor ang lagay ng panahon. Maiiwasan na ang delikadong paglaot.
Hindi po natin alam kung anong mga nangyayari sa karagatan kung tayo po ay papalaot. We're hoping po na ang ISDAP ay makatulong po sa atin.
At dahil community-based ang weather updates, matatanggap ng mga taga-Dingalan ang ulat panahon na tungkol sa kanilang lugar lamang. Sa lengguaheng mas maiintindihan ng karamihan.
Kung hindi sila preparado sa kanilang paglaot ay nauwi sa mga sakuna. Napaka-importante nito sa ating mga mangingisda.
Makakakuha po kayo ng mga magagandang datos na magiging guide ninyo sa inyong pangingisda. Especially na prone tayo sa bagyo, prone tayo sa masamang panahon.
Makakatanggap ng update kahit hindi naka-smartphone.
Mas okay po sa amin yung ngayon kasi updated na po. Pwede kami hindi lumaot basta na-i-update kami, nakuha namin yung weather. Hindi na kami panghilaan ng loob pag nasa laot. Hindi na kami mangangapuhap ng impormasyon.
Malaki ang may tutulong nito sa kanilang kabuhayan.
Ang ISDAP ay isang malaking tulong sa impormasyon upang sila po ay maproteksyonan po natin at mabigyan ng tamang paggabay sa kanilang kaligtasan.
Lahat ng ito posible dahil sa tulong ng Globe, National Fisheries Research and Development Institute at ng Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources.
Kayo po ang mga mangingisda, ang isa sa pinaka-importanteng sektor ng ating lipunan. Sinisiguro po ninyong may seguridad sa pagkain ang ating mga kababayan. Kaya naman mahalaga na kayo rin ay may seguridad.
Alam namin ang kontribusyon ng bawat sektor ng pamayanan. Ito ang aming pinapahalagahan.
Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, local government officials, Chairman Abalos, Ambassador Anke, and our distinguished guest and audience. I would like to take you to a very quick run-through of readiness in terms of the rainy season insofar as we are looking at from the perspective of growth. We talk about beyond rainy season readiness and connectivity. As you can see from the initial video, it is a kind of solution that we are providing for our fishermen so that they are aware when it's time to safely go out and continue with the fishing. It's very important because safety at sea is one of the prime considerations also for ensuring that our livelihood programs for the fishermen are okay. So let me take you through what it takes for us. Preparedness and business site continuity is a key component of the entire life cycle of the Globe network, from the time we start planning for the network, start looking at pre-hazard assessments. From the time we design the infrastructure that we are putting up in place, from the time we build the network, and then from the operate and maintain perspective as well. Then we also have service quality management and then the plant upgrade. So it's a cycle altogether. When we look at hazard assessment, we look at where the site is. We understand the hazards associated with the site. We do a hazard assessment in terms of geological hazards and all other risks, including possibility of earthquakes or fault lines, because it is a key input to the network plan and design. With that, we plan to design the network accordingly with respect to the hazards. So we always have it in mind what could actually be at risk at this point in time when a natural hazard occurs. Site infrastructure solution incorporating risk hazard information engineering standard comes into play. Innovation in site design to mitigate risk hazards, physical and logical resilience in disaster recovery. We are of the belief that the natural hazards do not just come alone. For example, when the rainy season comes, we know that it's also the time when we will have the storms and the typhoons. Flooding could occur, landslides could occur, and with that, you could also lose energy, power, and electricity. And for that, we build the sites in order to be able to withstand and be able to survive those circumstances. As you build the network, then the site build implementation happens, the facility readiness for telecom work is included, the installation, commissioning, and integration of telco equipment comes into play, and including power systems and remote site management, including the testing of the site. In some of the sites which we define as umbrella sites, for example, in the cell site, these are sites that are supposed to stay up, the first to go down, and the first to go up, as we say. And with that, we provide them with enough infrastructure facilities, including backup power systems and even generators, in order that when the or electricity comes down, then we are still able to continue the operations, because we know that at this point in time, during the times of natural calamities, it is when connectivity is most important. In terms of operating the network, we have a 24/7 monitoring by the Globe Service Command Center. We have field operations, preventive maintenance, and then, of course, our disaster response and recovery. Service quality management also comes into play because we want to make sure that the services that we offer are usable and acceptable, and that our customers enjoy their service whichever way they want to use it. And then, of course, the cycle goes coverage expansion for new expansion areas, coverage improvements for existing coverage areas, platforms and technology refresh, and all that happens. And the cycle. Now, let me take you to one example of what we done. How we use geohazard information for site planning. This is a particular site in Pangasinan, in Lingayen. This is Barangay Kapandanan. It's a hypothetical site that we are looking at. We use geoanalytics page as a source of information for flood. And because we're looking at it from this perspective, we know that we need to be able to build a site that should be able to withstand levels of flood. There's a lot of information available on GeoRisk PH, which is a multi-agency initiative led by Phil Box and funded by the DOST and monitored by the PICERT. And we are able to use that as well for some of our site plans. Other than that, of course, as we say, we always work closely with the community to ask the community itself what the experiences of previous flooding incidents, so that we know that we're exactly have a clear understanding of what to put in place. The next slide shows you what happens when we understand and we build the site. In the past, many people would wonder, why is this Globe Telecom building something like this in this part of the town? This is actually an elevated platform which is designed such that when the flood waters rise, then the equipment, the critical equipment, including the power systems, are still well above the water. That's why the net factor is actually designed to address risks and threats and vulnerabilities. We're adapting to the environment itself, to the natural geological hazards in place. The elevated pads for deployment of tele-equipment are used to mitigate risk of equipment being flooded out. The height of the pad is reference to historical flooding in the area and flood hazard information from the DOST PAGASA and also from the local community, the LGU. The tower structure is based on wind zone loading information in the region and the latest NSCP guidelines. In the past, when I was still working with engineering, we would build the sites of the towers on the Pacific flank of the Philippines to withstand up to about 250 kilometers per hour wind. This has already changed, and the latest guidelines is that in this particular wind zone, we should be building somewhere around 300 kilometers per hour, plus a little headroom as well. What happens when we are looking at a flood or a typhoon coming? There's proactive monitoring, as I initially said. We have 24/7 monitoring. It's a pity I couldn't show you how it looks like, but we're monitoring practically a lot of information about the weather and also local news so that we know exactly and we're kept abreast of what's happening in the Philippines or in the immediate vicinity. So the proactive monitoring of conditions that can escalate into an emergency or disaster situation via our GSCC results for early response and service restoration at the soonest possible time. When we say triggering an early response, what do we actually mean? It is triggering a business continuity plan and action, which includes the activation of the Crisis Management Committee, alerting and preparation of disaster response teams, prepositioning and deployment of disaster response teams, emergency equipment, installation materials, vehicles, fuel, transportable power equipment, and even our manpower. We have coordination and communication plan with other stakeholders, which includes our government and the NDRRMC in particular. We take on impact assessment and service restoration detailing immediately as soon as the hazard has passed us, and triggering CSR action to help affected communities. In the framework of GLOBE's business continuity, the community is very important because we are part of the community when we have our equipment and our network facilities. And triggering CSR action is part and parcel of that business continuity response. Other than that, of course, the early initiation of service restoration based on our restoration time objective. It's an example of what information sources that we actually monitor. For example, there's typhoon 2000.ph, which presents to us the track of the typhoon. And we also look at Zoom Earth information to actually see almost in real time or near real time how the typhoon is coming or where it is at already. With this information, we know exactly what time the typhoon will pass by, or we have an estimate to a very close degree, and we know exactly when we can mobilize our network operations people to start restoration of the service. We show you a video of what typically it is in terms of preparing for this.
Kababahalang isipin ang pagpasok ng makapaminsalang typhoon season sa gitna ng nararanasang pandemya. Kung saan, importante ang internet at communications dahil sa marami ang naka-work from home at nagdi-distance learning. Kaya naman, mahalaga na matatag ang infrastruktura ng communications network laban sa mga pinsalang dulot ng natural disasters at climate-related hazards gaya ng bagyo. Bilang major provider ng telecommunication services sa bansa, Globe is committed to building a resilient network designed to withstand natural disasters.
Resilient network means aside a network that never fails as much as possible. Tumaas kasi yung standards ng Philippines, no, given climate change. So it means we have to retrofit so that we can allow it to sustain the additional standards.
Armed with lessons and experiences from the past, pinag-iigting din ng Globe ang pagkakaroon ng mga rapid deployment solutions at pag-apply ng angkop na mitigating factors para maiwasan at agad na masolusyonan ang malalaking pinsala gaya ng power outages, pagkasira ng mga cell sites at pagkabunot o pagkaputol ng mga kable dala ng malalakas na bagyo, lindol at landslides.
We have always been looking for newer, more efficient equipment and technologies. Cell site on wheels is essentially a complete cell site with all the electronics and hardware. Then we have also tower on wheels. Yung controller on a light truck naman is access concentrator for the mobile telephone network.
Habang sinisiguro ng lahat ang kaligtasan ng pamilya sa loob ng kani-kanilang mga bahay, Globe, through its network technical group, stands in the front lines to ensure we stay connected during these critical times.
NTG has always stood by principles of agility and efficiency. To be quick whenever necessary. Nasa harap kami kaagad, binabantayan namin ang mga parating na bagyo. Ika nga, pag sinabi natin typhoon season na, nandyan na kami, nakahanda na kami.
At sa pamamagitan ng pagpapatupad ng business continuity management, mas nagiging epektibo ang pagresponde at pag-recover ng team sa mga nasa salantang equipment. Sa tulong na rin ng local government units na handang makiisa sa pagre-restore ng network services sa kani-kanilang lugar, lalo na sa panahon ng sakuna kung saan kailangan ang komunikasyon.
Oras na nandyan na parating na bagyo, wala nang tulugan yan.
Kaugnay nito, nakikipagtulungan din ang Globe sa iba't ibang sektor para sa mga disaster relief and response initiatives.
Everybody works together, lalo na ngayon na pandemic. There are well-established process para we will be able to provide the necessary coverage and signal to the community.
Globe is committed to building a network that can withstand the impact of climate-related risks and natural disasters to provide continued connectivity.
Our focus is in ensuring business continuity during disaster and extreme weather events, and by initiating projects that allow Globe to effectively respond and recover to major disasters. We are able to help and work hand in hand with the government in providing the much-needed communication service to the people.
Okay, so that's how we respond and how we prepare for upcoming typhoons. And then finally, just to share with you also, as I said, the community is close to our hearts, and we're trying to make sure that everything is well taken care of, including the local community that we belong to. And this is how we do it. We have our own program for assisting the community, which included in our disaster response. Disaster response is included in our business continuity. We have free mobile services for customers in disaster-stricken areas via geotagging. We have very interesting solutions for this, including network in a box. We have the deployment of a Jeep Sagit for libreng tawag, libreng charging, libreng Wi-Fi stations, and areas affected by the calamities. We had a very interesting experience on why we started to offer libreng charging. During one of the powerful typhoons which hit the Bicol region, where our engineers were able to restore a majority of the services about 6 hours after the typhoon struck progressively. But then on the radio, we keep hearing the radio reporter saying that there's no service here and the local community is complaining there's no service. But the engineers on the field were already sending pictures via their mobile phones of the situation on the ground. So we know that the service is up and about. And when we started to find out why, it was because the people have no charges on their phone anymore. So we have to provide a way. So nagkaroon kami ng libreng tawag, libreng jeep, libreng charging, and Wi-Fi stations for that. And then of course we have fundraising initiatives to Globe Rewards and GCash. So, for example, last year we had the Ulysses PH Aid, and we were able to donate a lot of money also for assisting the affected communities. And then that's all for our presentation for today. So to our more wonderful Globe, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you very much, Manny. Indeed, preparedness and business continuity are key components to uninterrupted, or in a worst case scenario, minimal interruption to our lifeline services. And these are also the major programs in our organization, the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. Thank you. Okay, so now let us proceed with the panel discussion. Let me invite our speakers back on screen. Chairman Abalos, Dr. Andreas Klippe, Dr. Misaka Hetiarachi, Attorney Princess Feliciano, Mr. Manuel Estrada, and we will also be joined by Mr. Bill Luz, the chair of Livable Cities Lab. So let's kick off today's Q&A with some questions. We have a lot of questions in our chat box. Let me start with Chairman Abalos. We have a few questions for you here. If we can start with a question from Mr. Dinky. How does MMDA collaborate with the individual LGUs in implementing flood control activities, and how do the LGUs share in the responsibility?
Well, for one, MMDA has no police power. We have no lawmaking power. We just coordinate, and as much as possible, we try to integrate, and we also coordinate not only with the different LGUs, but likewise with the plan of the national government, particularly the Department of Public Works and Highways, who are the ones tasked in these big projects. I'll give you an example right now. Right now, aside from the 64 pumping station that I mentioned, there will be around 20 more pumping stations that are going to be built. And they will be strategically located in the whole of Metro Manila. This will be built by the Department of Public Works, and the MMDA always is in coordination with them on where to place these pumping stations.
Thank you. Now that you've mentioned about the pumping station, there is a question here that aside from pumping stations, what flood control technologies the government is considering to mitigate urban flooding?
Well, if we're going to look at the landscape of Metro Manila flooding, it's all about Sierra Madre mountain range. All of this water, every time it rains, it goes to the. That's why Marikina with Attorney Feliciano here, there's the ones adversely affected, because they're the first LGU as far as Metro Manila is concerned. Actually, what we could do here is, of course, the solution will be upstream. What do I mean? There could be a retarding dam or basin in other LGUs to catch this, so that before it falls on Marikina, or even a dam, just to control this water. And a big portion of this will pass through Marikina to two river waters. The first will be Laguna de Bay, and then later on it's Manila Bay. The problem is when it goes through Laguna Lake, it will pass through Pasig River. And Pasig River is just, not that big. If we're going to look at it, there are actually 4 LGUs that are affected. Why are they affected? Because the water is higher than the land. Some of the portions here. I'm talking of Taguig, I'm talking of Pateros, parts of Pasig, and parts of Cainta. That is why they built a dike over these areas and pumping stations. So for me, as far as MMDA is concerned, we've discussed this so far. What are things in mind? Of course, as I've mentioned, number one probably will be a retarding basin in LGU, particularly some LGU near on the upstream, or even a dam. And number two, if it reaches Laguna Lake, we could still think of a spillway. Now that we have the technology about the subway, which goes underneath the water, you no longer have to purchase property. Because if it's 40 meters down, it's owned by government. And, just use this technology of the driller and pass through it. And of course, there's another thing. I don't know, but I'm not a technical person, but you could go down with their around. If Parañaque spillway is not viable because of cost, you could now go to the Pacific Ocean. It could be studied technically.
Thank you. Last question for NMDA Chairman. Have we harmonized our plans with DPWH?
Well, yes. So far, we're always in constant touch. communication with DPWH, and so with the LGUs of Metro Manila. Veronica, if it's possible, Bill and the other speakers, I'm sorry, but I have to go because my dad is in the hospital right now. He's getting operated. I have to be with him. I'm sorry, but can you excuse me
No
for a
problem.
while?
Okay, so at this point, if I may turn to Dr. Misaka, I know that you have responded to the questions already, but it's good to, respond to it live, especially on the question posted by Mr. Dinky. Go ahead, Dr. Misaka.
Yeah, I responded to a couple of them live, but I think they were both, the questions posed by Mr. Dinky were both like very important questions that we usually get, especially when dealing with community-related audiences, like with people who are directly dealing with communities and also planning. So the questions were, how can we implement floodplain-wide, like distributed solutions or methods such as natural and nature-based methods, when most like a big portion of the floodplain is owned privately, right? And the second is these communities who are living in floodplains, who occupy large portion of the floodplains, are mostly poor communities who do not have other alternative places to go, can't afford ones. So how can resettlement be done in a socially just and sustainable way? Like as I said earlier, like very important questions. So to divide and conquer, the floodplain, the land tenure issue of land tenure in floodplains is a pretty big issue. It's not only confined to the floodplains, it spreads across the watersheds, because most of the watersheds are actually privately owned, not only by single households, but also like as you go up in the watersheds, it's mainly owned by large, plantation companies and things like that, large private owners, like especially in countries like Sri Lanka, where I think it's very similar in the Philippines as well, where it's a cluster of small islands where you have hilly areas in the middle, right? So you have hills in the middle, very, very, very quick, in a very short distance, it reaches the coast. So it's urban in the coastal section, and then mostly plantations in the middle and the upper watersheds. Like in the Philippines, it's I assume it will be mostly coconut plantation. So this is a big problem. So one way that we advocate is, or rather, one approach we support through in our WWF initiative is to come into partnerships and community engagement related initiatives. One example that I can give is we are currently in the process of an advocacy program as well as a training program for the plantation sector companies on watershed-based watershed-based flood risk management programs. We have an ongoing partnership with the Irrigation Department of Sri Lanka, who actually carries the mandate for nationwide flood risk management. So we are trying to bring these two parties together, because the floods they manage, the Irrigation Department manage, actually originates in the upper watersheds of the country.
Thank you very much. Interesting insights there, especially in watershed management. Let's go back to Dr. Misaka once his connection is okay. Attorney Princess, I understand that you are in the middle of your vaccination program right now. Is your mega vaccination site flood protected? How are you preparing, ma'am, for the vaccination?
Well,
this rainy season.
Yes, as we've said, we're a catch basin, so we're not flood proof actually. But I think what's important is you identify areas which are not flood prone. So in identifying our vaccination sites, we identified, actually we have 3 evacuation centers used now as our vaccination sites. And our mega vaccine facility, our support center, is actually our logistics center, Bayanihan Center. That's where we store our supplies in case of disaster. So really, we identified areas that are not flood prone. Of course, the experience in Ulysses is extraordinary. Some of the evacuation centers were flooded even, but of course, there's always contingency in that case. Our support center is an 8-story building. So in case vaccination activities are ongoing, we can always move it at the other floors. But our protocol should always be implemented. Prevention is better. No? It's I think the best solution out there. So in case there is the first alarm already, vaccination activity should be deferred at a safer date.
Thank you, Attorney, and hope to see you attain your herd immunity by December. Thank you very much, Attorney. So
Perhaps
let's.
can I add something to the attorney's statement?
Yes, go ahead, Andrea.
That is, of course, always difficult to decide, and sometimes flood prone is not flood safe, or it's not automatically you are flooded, and not being in a flood prone area does not mean that you are safe from flood. We have seen cases in Clark where an office has told us the government is always saying Clark is a flood free area. We are based in Clark, so I know what I'm talking about. It's not Bulacan, it's not Pampanga, but there was the Clark Investors and Locators Association's office, and I was their vice chairman for a while. That's why I know these things. And one day they called us, and they were flooded in the middle of Clark, up to the ankles. So that means the situation can always change. And that is what I only can recommend, to observe it very well. Flood protection is not that you do one measure and then it's done. It is a continuous process for the next 100 years. And it will always be with us, like this coronavirus in a way. But step by step, we can improve. And always a little bit. We can never make everything 100% flood-free. That is almost impossible. But we can approach to the status. And so go ahead, like the other hospitals in Bataan and Dinalupian and Mazantol have done already, because that was also their problem.
Thank you, Andreas, for that rejoinder. Let me go to a question for Manny. Speaking of technology and innovation, can you provide us a sample of monitoring devices or applications that alert the community in terms of preparedness and monitoring?
One of the solutions that we were looking at is a very simple rain gauge and wind anemometer that we have, except that this time we're looking at something that is able to provide the information directly to our GSCC, which then allows us to actually monitor the weather conditions as they change on the fly. There are indeed available out there solutions that you can buy. These are weather stations that are portable that you can actually deploy. But a very simple one, because we already have are monitoring the approaching typhoon and even the GSCC, is to implement a local-based alerting system. And it can be a simple automation of a church bell or even a siren. And today, the telcos are actually mandated to send out emergency broadcast messages to the community. And I think all of the telcos are already providing that information at the moment. The rest of the other items in terms of preparedness, surely we can work with the local community, but we need to work so that can work with the local disaster. There's a local and provincial disaster response agency that we can work with. It's very important that in the future that we automate a lot of this data gathering, and we are able to put all of this together, because we can get as much insight as possible and actually have a prediction of some sort, of some level, of what can actually happen at that point in time. But again, it is very unpredictable, and Dr. Misaka is correct. It is very unpredictable. What you have in the business continuity guidebook, you have to be able to actually understand that it is not a silver bullet, that the typhoon or the calamity comes in, that you will have to be on your wits, be on your toes, and be ready for anything that happens.
Thank you, Manny. Here's the question for you, Andreas. Dr. Andreas, what is the logic of having elevated roads, which is intended to address flooding in the area? How about the residential areas near where the elevated road? This is actually open to everybody, but I thought of addressing this to you with the examples that you have shared a while ago. Go ahead, sir.
I'm now the one who has to explain to the residents along the elevated roads why they get suddenly flooded. Thank you. Of course, elevated roads have an advantage to go from A to B. So since this highway connection to Marikina from the NLEX is there, I really enjoy it. Before I always used 5 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. From Clark to Marikina to Makati from time to time. So in this case, this elevated road really helps. But what the person who was asking probably means is an elevated road in between a village and the houses at the left and at the right side without the distance are. What shall I do? The problem is indeed, and that is what I see with the eyes of a foreigner, is that every houses are very close to the streets. And at the beginning, I don't remember who was talking about that, whether it was who of the panelists was saying that to change the code of construction. So that is something what really should be considered, and I don't see anything about that. That is probably one solution. So what can the people do? They cannot do that much because the water from the elevated road will also go down through a drainage system and suddenly end up in their gardens. So the only thing with what they can do is they can protect their premises. I mean, or you wait until the big solution comes, and very, very often these big solutions never come because it takes 10, 20, 30 years until dams and dikes are built. You need a lot of money, and sometimes they are not built in a way that they are really helpful. And do you want to wait a lifetime and you get flooded every year? And then a person was asking, is there a cheap solution available? And then I said, there is no cheap solution available. And the question should be asked as follows. What do you want to protect and what is the value? Do you want to continue to clean up the mess every year and to spend your precious time? Do you want to continue to spend your hard-earned money from your sons, your children, perhaps from overseas workers, year and year again for cleaning up the mess, for renovating, for repair and replacement purchases? Then don't do anything. Or you think how to protect, as long as it can be protected. We are not talking about 10 meters. Then invest and protect your home because it's a lifetime investment and you are totally independent from what is going on around you because you cannot avoid this water, what is coming. That is my answer. I don't have another one.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Andreas. Indeed, asking the right question is the key there and also priority. Unfortunately, we run out of time, but I will give each one of you 2 sentences as your closing remarks. If I may start with Bill.
Thank you, Veron. Well, I just really want to thank all the speakers today. Chairman Ben Avalos, who had to leave us, Attorney Princess from Marikina, and please send our regards to Mayor Marcy, Dr. Andreas, Clip, Manny Estrada, Dr. Misaka. I think what we learned today is that there's so many ways to address this issue. And it's a matter of balancing the nature-based solution and engineering solutions, and to always study our risk. And I think that's what, those are the tough questions we need to decide. Study our risk. What's the value? What do we want to protect? What do we want to not protect? These are the key questions. And I think we learned a lot today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Bill. Let me call on Dr. Misaka. You were cut off a while ago for your closing remarks, please.
Thanks. And sorry for that technical mishap. And so very quickly, my closing sentence would be, it'll align very much with what Dr. Andreas and Engineer Estrada said and demonstrated through examples, the message that we've learned to give through our program is embrace uncertainty, adapt, and think small. It's time to move away from these big solutions and start thinking small.
Love that. Think small. Okay. All right. So let's call on Attorney Princess for your closing remarks.
So perhaps what Marikina can offer and share during this discussion, I hope everybody here can learn, is likewise accept your situation already, because Marikina has accepted that by topography, we are really a catch basin. So we have to adapt, like Dr. Misaka said. So I think that's very important for you to have or implement interventions according to your situation. So you adapt to it. I think because of climate change and other circumstances, we're really in a situation that we need to act based on what we need and what the people need. So that's my final message.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Princess. 2 sentences, Dr. Andreas.
If you don't want to continue to spend your time with cleaning up the mess and you don't want to spend your hard-earned money, then sign up and reserve your slot and learn how you can take action and protect your belongings, your family, your governmental facilities, business units, and take action now. 2 sentences.
Thank you, Dr. Andreas. For sure, your webinar will be well attended after this. And last but not the least, our host, let me turn you over to Mr. Estrada for his closing remarks.
Well, earlier when we were having the short panel huddle, I showed them a slide of something that is very close to everyone's heart, Noah's Ark. Everything that we are trying to do now in the network as we design it, we learned from Noah's Ark. When Noah's Ark was built and designed, it wasn't raining, and people were saying, are these guys crazy? But the reality is, it is not craziness. It is making sure that you understand that the risks are there, and you have to evolve with the risk. Otherwise, adapt with nature, that you can protect what is important for everyone and for your.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Estrada. Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have much time already, and we have to close. And to formally close this webinar, may we call on Mr. Fidel Pamintuan of League of Cities of the Philippines. Fidel Pamintuan is the Program Officer for Marketing, Networking, and Advocacy at the League of Cities of the Philippines and heads the communication efforts of the organization. Mr. Pamintuan also supports the League's capacity building programs for city government, especially in the thematic areas of urban environmental sustainability and early grade learning. He also represents the League's member cities in stakeholder engagements related to arts and culture, HIV or AIDS response, and climate change. Friends, Mr. Fidel Pamintuan. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Veronica. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. So allow me first to acknowledge our special guests, Her Excellency German Ambassador Anke Reifenstuhl, MMDA Chair, former Mandaluyong City Mayor and LCP National President from 2007 to 2010, Mr. Benhur Abalos, Marikina City Deputy Administrator, Attorney Princess Feliciano, Dr. Andrea Clipa of Flood Control Asia, Dr. Misaka Hitiyarachi of WWF, Mr. Manny Estrada, Senior Vice President of Globe Telecom, Mr. Bill Luz of the Livable Cities, and to all city mayors and LGU officers dialed into this call. A pleasant afternoon to all. On behalf of LCP President Bacolod City Mayor Bing Leonardia and all the other city mayors of the League of Cities of the Philippines, I congratulate the Livable Cities and Globe Telecom for another successful online session of the Livable Labs. We thank the resource speakers for sharing with us their experiences in addressing the untoward impacts of the monsoon season that regularly besets the country around this time of the year. We appreciate the plans and projects initiated by both the MMDA and Marikina City LGU, 2 hardworking government offices that are undoubtedly well-versed with rainy season preparedness and disaster risk response. Meanwhile, we also recognize the innovative solutions in engineering and connectivity presented to us by the WWF, Flood Control Asia, and Globe. If anything, the private and development sectors have always been reliable partners of local governments in service delivery, from infrastructure development to disaster preps to emergency response to recovery. We live at a time when people have come to terms with the inevitability of natural disasters and public health crises. For instance, during this ongoing pandemic, we keep hearing the word pivot, which has prompted a lot of us to evaluate the capacities of our institutions or even our personal capacities to adapt to uncertainties and vulnerabilities. Yes, disasters may come and go, but the question now is how consistent are we in effectively responding to these challenges, and how quickly are we able to resume public service operations? And this is where I think the importance of public service continuity plans come into play, especially for our local governments. These plans that serve as a guide for the resumption of service delivery are crucial in building the resilience of local governments in times of crises. Continuity plans help prepare sufficiently, orchestrate immediate recovery, and resume LGU operations in the quickest possible way. I'm happy to learn that many of our cities have adopted these plans in their operations. Furthermore, we're pleased to know that the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation has been rolling out training programs for some of our cities to assist them in building their own continuity plans. Another takeaway that I wish to highlight when it comes to rainy season preparedness is the importance of interlocal cooperation, or the collaboration among neighboring cities and municipalities to invest in flood management infrastructure. Many of us already know that flooding and rains aren't confined in just one location, and more often than not, their impacts tend to be more systemic. With this in mind, we believe that that a more practical way of sustainably addressing flooding would be for LGUs to band together when adopting wide-scale flood management projects. Such an arrangement would also help address the huge investment required for these infrastructures. So in closing, the League is grateful to work with the Livable Cities and Globe in creating this platform for cities to share their experiences and learn about the innovative approaches when preparing for rains, typhoons, and floods. Again, disasters may come and go, but if we focus on continuity and cooperation, then preparations and response efforts can be made more sustainable and impactful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fidel. Very well captured. And I also would like to thank our speakers for sharing their insights in this webinar. Also, please follow us on our social media, Facebook, livablecitiesPH, and also Instagram and Twitter. Finally, this and our other webinars in the Livable Cities Lab series would not be possible without our sponsors and partners, namely League of Cities of the Philippines and Globe Telecom. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a good day.